Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new reaction video. Today we're reacting to Top 10 Most Hated Skate Parks by the one, the only, Skateparks. Action.
As a lot of you may know, there's tons of different styles of skate parks out there. Some of them are good and others are not so good. Recently, I made a video on the different types of skate parks and you guys left a ton of great suggestions, so I decided it was worth making a part 2. If you feel like anything was left out, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Do me a favor and leave a like on the video. Check out the links in the description. And with that said, let's get right into it. Action code skate. So to start things off, we have the prefab park. Prefab skate parks are parks that are made out of pre-assembled ramps that are typically made in a factory. This is probably the cheapest skate park style to build, so for a while, they were also the most common. Many prefab parks share the same ramp dimensions with other parks since there's only a handful of manufacturers that actually make them. Typically, these parks are made out of metal, but some of them will use other materials like high-density plastic or wood. Out of all of the types of skate parks out there, I feel like prefab parks are definitely the most underrated. A lot of skaters hate on these parks since they're not as polished as newer parks, but depending on the park in question, they can actually be a lot of fun to skate. This could just be my own bias since I'm from the East Coast and I grew up skating prefab parks, but I think when they're done right, they're really not that bad. Now, it's worth mentioning that prefab parks can be pretty janky, and since most of them are kind of dated, they do attract sketchy characters, so it's kind of a hit or miss. You might think that prefab parks are a pretty basic type of skate park to start the list off with, but I promise you, the rest of the list definitely gets better. Number 2 on the list is the pump track. Skateboard pump tracks aren't usually a skate park by themselves, but they can be a fun extension to an already existing park. Pump tracks are most commonly made of asphalt, but there's some of them that are made of wood, there's some of them that are made of concrete, and there's even some of them that are made of plastic. Skateboard pump tracks can be a lot of fun because they allow you to constantly flow around, and it's something you can skate regardless of how good you are. That is, of course, assuming that you can ride a skateboard, because if you can't ride one, then you probably can't skate the pump track. One major downside to pump tracks is that they can attract a lot of kids or just beginners in general, which can definitely make them a lot harder to skate. Also, even though tons of them are made specifically for skateboards, some of them are geared more towards bikes. Other than that though, most of them are fun to mess around on, and they're a nice change of pace. Number 3 on the list is the multi-million-dollar skate park. The multi-million-dollar skate park is the kind of park that most skateboarders dream of. These are the massive skate parks that you see in bigger cities that cost several $1,000,000 to build. Generally speaking, because these parks are so massive, they have a good blend of both street and transition obstacles. This normally means a really large street section along with several bowls and pools and sometimes even a snake run. Since the majority of multi-million-dollar skate parks are newer, they're usually really nice parks that are located in good areas. This means you don't have to deal with sketchy characters like you do at other parks, but you're also much more likely to have a bunch of kids getting in your way, so there's kind of a trade-off. Obviously, since these parks cost millions of dollars to build and take up a ton of space, they're not the most common, but as skateboarding continues to grow in popularity, we'll probably see more of these parks popping up. The 4th skate park on the list is the ditch spot. Ditch spots are a ton of fun because they have the feel of DIY skate parks, but because they naturally have transition built into them, they also have the flow of a snake run. Even though there's ditch spots all over the world, there's definitely a heavy concentration of them in the Midwest of the United States since they don't get as much rain there and they're a much more common part of the infrastructure. The cool thing about ditch spots is that they're all unique. There's some ditch spots that are miles long, and there's others that are super short, but they always have some unique features. The best part about this type of park is that since they're usually out of the public eye, skateboarders don't get bothered as much when they make them, and they last way longer than other types of DIY skate parks. Now, since they are drain ditches, they do attract a lot of sand and debris, but aside from that, they don't have very many downsides. The ditch spot is probably my favorite type of skate park on this list, but if you think there's one that's better, then definitely leave it in the comments. Up next, we have the European skate park. Even though Europe is a massive continent with tons of different countries and cultures, a lot of their skate parks share the same look, and you can usually tell right away when a park is in Europe. Now, in recent years, European skate parks have gotten much nicer, but for a long time, they were notorious for being pretty bad. Most European skate parks have a design that makes it look like it's from the 90s or early 2000s, and the ramps usually aren't the best quality. Since the majority of European countries have harsh weather throughout the year, the parks also don't age the best, so even parks that started out nice tend to wear down pretty quickly. These types of parks always have a ton of graffiti, the concrete is always rough, and the ramps tend to have some pretty weird designs. This isn't to knock on European skateboarding, since the same thing can be said about US skate parks that are on the East Coast. Governments everywhere have taken a while to figure out how to build good skate parks, and when you're in an area with bad weather, the parks are naturally going to reflect that. Also, if anything, learning to skate at a bad skate park just makes it that much easier when you finally go to a nicer one. Again, some really nice parks have started to pop up in Europe, so fortunately, it seems like the trend is reversing, but for a while, most European skate parks were pretty crusty. So moving on, we have backyard ramps. Unlike full-on backyard skate parks, the backyard ramp is either a mini ramp or a bowl. In the skateboarding community, backyard ramps are definitely a favorite. A backyard ramp gives you a place to skate with your friends whenever you want, you don't have to worry about crowds, and they aren't nearly as expensive as a full-on skate park. The backyard ramp is great for solo sessions, or for skating with your friends, or even just for warming up. Almost every skater knows someone with a backyard ramp, and if for some reason you don't, well, this is your sign to finally build your own. A basic backyard mini ramp costs around $2,000 depending on the size, but if you get creative, you can probably build one for less. There's also the option to buy a pre-built ramp, which will save you the time and effort, but they are going to cost a little more. The next type of skate park on the list is the skate camp. As of now, there's very few skate camps in existence, but the ones that do exist tend to be pretty impressive. A skate camp is without a doubt the biggest type of skate park out there. To put things into perspective, Camp Woodward alone has over 300,000 square feet of skatable obstacles, and that's not even including all of the non-skateboarding stuff they have as well. Skate camps cover several acres of land, and they have literally every type of skatable obstacle that you can imagine. They have normal street plazas that are made of concrete, they have indoor skate parks that are made of wood, and they also have a ton of different types of transition. Aside from the basics, they also have obstacles that the average skater wouldn't even think about. For example, they have handrails that go into a foam pit so you can practice skating rails, and they also have ramps with rubber landing so you can practice skating transition. Other than just skating, skate camps also have normal summer camp activities, and they usually accommodate a ton of different action sports. The major downside to skate camps is they're really expensive, so it's something that only a small number of skaters can afford. As of now, it costs around $1,600 to go to Woodward for a week, and that's not even including travel. They do have the option to rent cabins for the weekend, so you can skate during the off season, but it still costs $130 per person, and you don't get access to all of the parks. The next type of skate park is the Street Plaza. The Street Plaza skate park isn't actually a skate park at all, but rather just a normal plaza or public park in a city that skaters eventually take over. Throughout the history of skateboarding, there have always been plazas in cities that skateboarders eventually claimed. These are spots like Love Park in Philadelphia, Embarcadero in San Francisco, Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C., and MACBA in Barcelona. The Street Plaza is what influenced the rise of actual skate park plazas, since they encompass most of the major features that skaters like. Street plazas have a lot of the staple obstacles in street skating, and they normally have a ton of marble and granite, which is why a lot of skaters gravitate towards them. A few common things you'll see at street plazas are different sizes of ledges to skate, usually a few stair sets or gaps, and best of all, they always have great flat ground. Essentially every major street plaza in the world has a rich history in skateboarding, so if you ever get the chance to go to one, they're definitely worth checking out. Next up, we have the Mega Ramp. Mega ramps are essentially a giant ramp that sends skaters across a gap with a massive vert ramp at the end of it. Mega ramps vary in size, but they tend to be around 75 feet tall, 350 feet long, and have a 50-foot gap in the middle. People have gotten creative with the ways that they skate mega ramps, and in addition to skating across the gap, people have also skated rails and ledges, and even jumped off of helicopters into the vert ramp. Mega ramps are probably what the majority of non-skaters think of when they hear people talk about skateboarding, but they're actually pretty rare. There's only a handful of mega ramps that exist, and there's very few people who can actually skate them. Aside from costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to build, mega ramps also take up a ton of space, and they really only serve a small number of people. With that said, it's still impressive to watch someone skate one, and even though the majority of skateboarders couldn't skate a mega ramp themselves, it's safe to say that they at least appreciate the people who can. In the past few years, people have started building mini mega ramps, which have a lot of the same perks of an actual mega ramp, but without as many drawbacks. They still allow vert skaters to do tricks that are similar to the ones they do on a full-size mega ramp, but they're not as expensive, they don't take up as much space, and they're much more accessible for the average skater. The next type of skate park is the fingerboard park. Now, right away, I'll admit that this isn't technically a skate park in the traditional sense, but I feel like they're almost too good not to mention. When I was a kid, people just used books as makeshift ramps, and they'd sometimes use tech deck ramps, but concrete fingerboard parks definitely didn't exist. Nowadays, not only are people building their own concrete fingerboard parks, but cities actually pay to have public fingerboard parks built, which is pretty cool, but it's also kind of mind-blowing. I've only ever seen a few of these in person, so they aren't super common yet, but I think as time goes on, they're going to become more standard. There's tons of different styles of skate parks out there, and they all come with their own set of pros and cons. I tried to cover as many as I could, but if you feel like any good ones were left out, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Do me a favor and leave a like on the video. Check out the links in the description, and with that said, thanks for watching.
Comment your favorite down below. I'll see you guys next time. Make sure you like and subscribe. Bye guys.